Welcome to the Red Story and just subscribe so I understand that everything is not in vain. Make some tea or coffee and listen to our new story, Echoes of a Broken Promise. My name is Omar Roman, a 38-year-old software engineer living in the vibrant city of Seattle, Washington. With its towering evergreens and misty mornings, Seattle has been my home since I moved here for college. I'm of Middle Eastern descent, raised in a Muslim family that values tradition and loyalty above all else. I met my wife, Aisha, during our freshman year at the University of Washington. She was a vision, long, dark hair cascading over her shoulders, warm brown eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and a smile that could light up the gloomiest Seattle day. We were young and in love, and when she told me she was pregnant with twins, we didn't hesitate to get married. It wasn't the way we planned it, but we were determined to build the life together. Our twin boys, Adam and Amir, were born during our sophomore year. Juggling parenthood in college was a challenge, but we managed. I took on extra courses and part-time jobs to support our growing family while Aisha paused her studies to care for the babies. Eventually, I graduated and landed a job at a tech startup, and Aisha returned to finish her degree. Years passed in a blur of work deadlines, soccer games, and family dinners. The boys grew into handsome young men, each with their own distinct personality. Adam, the older by 10 minutes, was thoughtful and introspective, with short, neatly trimmed hair and a penchant for classic literature. Amir was the outgoing one, his curly hair always a bit unruly, and a guitar never far from his side. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves painted the streets in hues of orange and gold, I was getting ready for work. I buttoned up my navy blue shirt, the one Aisha said brought out the hazel in my eyes, and headed downstairs. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and reading the news on my tablet. The house was unusually quiet. The boys had already left for college classes, and Aisha typically slept in on weekends. To my surprise, I heard soft footsteps descending the stairs. Aisha appeared in the doorway, her eyes red and puffy as if she'd been crying all night. Her long hair was disheveled, and she wore a simple white robe that hung loosely around her slender frame. "Good morning," I said cautiously, setting down my mug. "Is everything okay?" She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pulled out a chair and sat across from me, her gaze fixed on the wooden grains of the table. "Omar," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." A knot formed in my stomach. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, tears welling up in her eyes. "I can't keep this inside any longer. I have to tell you something." I reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled away. "You're scaring me, Aisha. Just tell me what's wrong." She looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time. "Last night, I was unfaithful to you." The words hung in the air, a heavy silence enveloping us. I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "After you left for work, I went out with Layla and Fatima. We went to that new restaurant downtown. There, we met some men, and one of them, I don't know what came over me. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. At that moment, Adam and Amir appeared in the doorway, their faces etched with concern. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" Adam asked cautiously. Aisha looked up, startled by their presence. "Oh no, you weren't supposed to hear this." Amir stepped forward, his fists clenched. "What did you do?" I stood up slowly, my expression unreadable. "Your mother and I are discussing something private. Please give us a moment." Adam shook his head. "We heard everything. How could you, Mom?" Aisha reached out toward them. "Please, let me explain." Amr pulled his brother back. "No, we don't want to hear it." They turned and left the room, the sound of the front door slamming echoing through the house. Aisha collapsed back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't how I wanted them to find out. I looked at her, my emotions locked behind a stoic facade. "When were you going to tell me?" "Today," she whispered. I couldn't bear the guilt any longer. I nodded slowly, picking up my briefcase. "I have to go to work." She looked up in disbelief. "That's it? You're just leaving?" I paused at the doorway. What else is there to say? Without waiting for a response, I left the house and drove to the office. The drive was a blur, the city streets merging into a tapestry of gray and muted colors. I arrived at work and immersed myself in coding and project meetings, refusing to let my personal life seep into my professional world. Hours passed, and as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the skyline, I knew I couldn't avoid the situation forever. I packed up and headed home, mentally preparing for the confrontation that awaited me. When I walked through the front door, the house was eerily quiet. The scent of Aisha's cooking was absent, replaced by a sterile emptiness. I found her in the living room, packing clothes into a suitcase. "You're leaving," I stated, more as a fact than a question. She looked up, eyes red and swollen. "I think it's best if I stay with my mother for a while." I set my keys on the table. "You don't have to go." She furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" "After what I've done." I took a deep breath. "I forgive you." She blinked in surprise. "What?" "I forgive you," I repeated. "We can move past this." She shook her head vigorously. "No, Omar, I can't forgive myself. I feel awful and I can't continue living like this. That's why I told you." I approached her slowly. "We have 20 years together. We have a family. Don't throw it all away over one mistake." She hugged herself tightly. "It's not that simple. The guilt is eating me alive. I need time to think." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "What about the boys? They're devastated." She winced. "I know. I'll talk to them. Try to make them understand." Just then, Adam and Amir entered the room. Adam's expression was cold, his arms crossed over his chest. Amir stood beside him, his jaw clenched. "Are you leaving?" Adam asked bluntly. Aisha nodded slowly. "Just for a little while." Amir scoffed. "Why not make it permanent?" "Amir," I scolded. He glared at me. "No, Dad. She broke our family. She doesn't get to walk away and come back when she feels like it." Aisha approached them cautiously. "Please, let me explain." Adam stepped back. "There's nothing to explain. You betrayed us." Tears welled up in her eyes again. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." Amir shook his head. "It's a little late for that." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Enough. Your mother made a mistake, but she's still your mother." He shrugged off my hand. "I can't even look at her." Without another word, they both retreated upstairs. Aisha collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there, unsure of what to do. After a moment, I spoke softly. "Maybe it's best if you go to your mother's tonight. Give everyone some space." She nodded weakly, wiping her eyes. "I'll call you later." She gathered her things and left, the door closing softly behind her. That night, the house felt emptier than ever. I sat alone in the living room, the ticking of the clock the only sound. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, something I rarely did, and stared out the window at the flickering city lights. Days turned into weeks. Aisha and I finalized our divorce quietly, without fanfare. She remained at her mother's house, and the boys refused to see her. I tried to encourage them to talk to her, but they were resolute in their anger. One evening, I found Amir strumming his guitar on the porch, his eyes distant. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's a free country." I sat beside him, the cool night air filled with the scent of pine and distant rain. "You know," I began, "holding on to anger doesn't heal anything." He plucked at the strings absently. "She hurt you. She hurt all of us." "People make mistakes," I replied. "It's how we respond to them that defines us." He looked at me skeptically. "You're defending her?" "I'm trying to understand her," I corrected. "And I want you to have a relationship with your mother." He sighed heavily. "I don't know if I can forgive her." "At least talk to her. Hear her out." He was silent for a moment before nodding slowly. "Maybe." I patted his shoulder. "That's all I asked." Inside, Adam was typing away on his laptop. I knocked gently on his door. "Hey, Dad," he said without looking up. "Got a minute?" He closed his laptop and gestured for me to sit. "I talked to Amir about reaching out to your mom," I said. He frowned. "I don't see the point." "She's still your mother, Adam. She loves you." He leaned back in his chair. She sure has a funny way of showing it. People are flawed, I said gently. But cutting her out of your life won't make the pain go away. He considered my words before replying, I'll think about it. That's all I can ask. As I left his room, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps time would mend the rift between them. Months passed. I settled into a new routine, focusing on work and supporting the boys as they navigated college and their own personal struggles. I continued to check in on Aisha through mutual friends, learning that she was doing well, but missed the boys terribly. One afternoon, I received a text from Adam. Having dinner with Mom tonight. A smile tugged at my lips. Progress. Later that evening, Amir informed me he was meeting with Aisha as well. I nodded approvingly. I'm proud of you. He shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Don't make a big deal out of it. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied with a wink. That night, I sat alone once more, but this time I felt a sense of peace. The boys were beginning to heal, and perhaps so was I. As for me and Aisha, we remained amicable. We spoke occasionally, mainly about the boys. One day, she called me out of the blue. Omar, can we meet for coffee? She asked hesitantly. Sure, I agreed. We met at a quaint cafe downtown, the aroma of freshly baked pastries filling the air. She smiled nervously. You look well. Thanks, you too. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke. I wanted to thank you. For what? For encouraging the boys to talk to me. I know it couldn't have been easy for you. I stirred my coffee. They're our children. They need their mother. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. I miss you. I pulled my hand back gently. Aisha. I know, she said quickly. I just wanted you to know. I sighed softly. I care about you, but things are different now. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I understand. We finished our coffee, parting with a friendly hug. As I walked away, I felt a mix of emotions, nostalgia, sadness, but also closure. Life continued its steady march forward. The boys graduated college, each pursuing their own paths. Adam went on to study law, his analytical mind perfect for the courtroom. Amir toured with his band, his music resonating with audiences across the country. One evening, as the sun set over the Seattle skyline, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, I stood on my balcony, reflecting on the journey I'd been on. A notification pinged on my phone. Amir had posted a new song dedicated to the complexities of love and forgiveness. I listened, the haunting melody and heartfelt lyrics touching my soul. Perhaps in the end, we all learned something about the fragility of trust and the strength it takes to forgive. Reader comments. Sofiek. What a touching story. It's rare to see such a mature handling of infidelity. Omar's patience and understanding are commendable. Jazz Lover 88. Amir's character really resonated with me. Holding on to anger is toxic, and I'm glad he found a way to express himself through music. Bookworm 32. I was on the edge of my seat, hoping they'd reconcile. Life isn't always black and white, and this story captures that complexity beautifully. Seeker 42. The descriptions of Seattle made me feel like I was right there with them, a heartfelt narrative about love, betrayal, and healing. Lunaski. I appreciate that the story didn't have a fairy tale ending, but instead showed realistic outcomes. Not every relationship can be saved, but growth is always possible. End of story.